Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Jill Coote. I'll be taking through the webinar this afternoon on behalf of Croner. We're going to look at recovery preparation, reopening your workplace. As this is causing quite a headache, I think, for a lot of people as to how to get it right first time, but it has to be very movable now that we can move with new legislation coming in, what we have to adhere to. So hopefully you'll all go away with something to assist you this afternoon. Just a little bit about Croner. You may have heard of us before, you may have not. If you have, do bear with me for a moment. Croner are the UK's longest running employment law and health and safety business in the UK. We have over 79 years experience and we have a huge amount of clients, as you can see. And that's from very small businesses that really do have just one, maybe part-time member of staff, up to the likes of multinationals and all sizes in between. But small to medium enterprises we advise the most on, because it's very difficult, isn't it? We're trying to run a business, we're trying to make a profit, we're trying to manage staff, we're trying to adhere to health and safety. I'm hoping we're getting it right. So getting the expertise and the right advice first time is key, because the decisions we make, the discussions we have with our staff and the processes we use, if we don't get it right, we can be exposed to an employment tribunal. As you can see, our tribunal case success is 85%, and that's very high because very often we step in once you've had tribunal papers served on you. And the reason we can effectively represent you, as we only represent the employer, is we have our own in-house solicitors and barristers that work only for Croner. At the moment, due to the pandemic, we are taking in excess of 2,500 advice line calls a day. It's the number of calls has just gone through the roof because, again, what do I do in business? How do I implement that effectively and things like that? So, as I say, we've had a huge amount of calls, and prior to this pandemic, we hadn't heard of coronavirus, now known as COVID-19. We know it's fatal, and the virus is still being studied, and currently there's no known cure, but the impact it's had on individuals, businesses, and the UK and worldwide has just been unbelievable, really. Now, I'm sure we've heard of the job retention scheme. You may have placed your staff on furlough. 10th of June was the last day that employees could be placed on furlough for the first time. But if you have staff coming back from maternity leave, paternity leave and the like, then they can be placed on furlough for the first time. From the 1st of July, flexible furlough is being introduced, and we are going to be running a webinar on that on the 3rd of July in association with BBF, if that's something that interests you, to give you more information and understand on that and how it can work effectively for your business. But crisis management, I think it's fair to say that, you know, as business owners, crisis management has been going into overdrive. So what are the areas to be considered? Because the lifting of lockdown restrictions are being lifted, but business recovery is paramount. And as an employer, there are many decisions to make about assessing your business operations, when to bring your employees back to work and how, but also ensuring the workplace is safe and the employees are safe as well. Now, as I say, some of the businesses have started to open up, others still have not. And I know in the travel and tourism, this is still an issue. So timelines very much vary on your industry, but to ensure robust planning for reopening and continuing robust planning is key, because this really is bringing a new set of employment challenges. And if it's not done effectively and compliantly, you as an employer, regrettably, may be exposed to legal liability if sufficient precautions are not taken. So what are the key considerations? Well, first of all, to make sure your business is protected. So again, what process do you have embedded in your business? Now, they need to be fluid because with new legislation coming in. So what company policies do you have in place? Do they need to be reflected upon? Do new need to be added? And I'll be addressing this at the end of the webinar, things you need to look at now. But also employees working from home, because whilst some employees have really enjoyed working from home, others have found it very difficult. You may be in a position where your employees are resisting coming back into the office because they like working from home. So all of these things we need to deal with. But also, regrettably, you may be looking at reducing your workforce to protect cash flow. So what steps can you take about that? And if it's something you are considering or looking at redundancy, please do have a word with Nick Babington. His details are at the end, who is a director of Croner that you can speak to directly about this to get the right assistance. And the reason we're not saying do have a chat about redundancy at the end of the webinar today is because it's a very private matter for businesses, and obviously people know other people in companies as you're all local. But essentially, the actions you take as an employer, are they within the constraints of the law? Because I see an awful lot of employers in trouble because the decisions they've made could be morally right, but actually they haven't been compliant. And that's where a lot of the breakdown comes in. So protecting employees and business recovery, they need to work very much hand in glove. So under the Equality Act changes in 2010, you have a duty of care to protect your employees, and that's for the health and safety and welfare. So you need not expose them to unnecessary risk. And even when they're working from home for you, have they done a working from home risk assessment? Because you want them to say they are safe working in their own homes, because slips, trips and falls cost employers a lot of money each year. And you don't want to be in a position, if something happens in their home, you could be liable. As crazy as that sounds, it does happen. So, but also putting your employees in a position where they could become infected without taking all reasonable precautions. And that's that word reasonable. What does it actually mean? And we'll be exploring that a little bit more. But also, you're also responsible for your employees' well-being. So, as I mentioned, some of your staff love working from home, some find it very difficult. They now have financial issues. They may have, think they might be having to leave the house they rent, or it could be issues with childcare, all these things. So do you have wellbeing initiatives embedded in your business that your staff can tap into? Because it's not just employing people, it's a holistic approach to employing people. So something like an employee assistance program. If you don't, you're really not underpinning your duty of care under the Equality Act changes. If you do want to, obviously, know more about that, do have a word with Nick, as we have an employee assistance program called Health Assured. You may have heard of it. We own that business, and we have won the best mental health provider for the 3rd year running, because there's a lot of mental health issues with all sorts of areas of the worries this pandemic has caused. So again, something you may like to explore. When will we return to normal? Well, what does normal even mean anymore? It's very unlikely for the foreseeable future. But also, if when you do open, your work is far from completed, because you want to open to welcome back your workers and your others and clients and customers. But it's really important that you maintain routine cleaning and disinfection procedures after reopening to reduce the potential for exposure. Now, this can mean different things for different businesses. So whilst I'm talking somewhat generically, if to pinpoint this, we can certainly work with you. But also as an employer, it's really important you continue to monitor COVID-19 in your area, because if the infection rate rises in your area, you need to be also prepared to close your doors of facilities quickly if another outbreak occurs. So again, that's the financial planning, the management planning as well that goes into that. The business recovery. Over the coming weeks and in months, organisations will begin to bring staff back into the physical workplace. But as I mentioned before, your plans are going to vary by workplace and your restriction. So industry specific, it's really important to assess the risks and ensure appropriate controls are in place. Now, also due to social distancing rules, segments of the workforce will continue to work remotely. So, what do we need to look at? Well, first of all, preparing the business. We're going to take these one by one. Then we're going to look at preparing the building, preparing the workforce, your control access, your social distancing plans, reducing touch points, increasing cleaning regimes, and communicating for confidence. And that's not just to your staff, but that's to your customers and clients as well. So preparing the business. Now, travel and tourism, you're still awaiting the green light. Is it going to be the 4th of July? We still don't know yet. But the industry bodies have written to the government to reiterate the urgent need to confirm reopening date. Also, industry bodies have requested specific guidelines, and regrettably, the government have yet to comment further on the proposed date. We are closely watching and monitoring, and we are very fluid and be able to set out the expectations as the government gives the green light in different areas. So preparing your business, first of all, keeping up to date with the latest and industry specific guidance. Now, if you are on board with us as a client, we will give you that guidance day by day as it's taking place. But you need to have in plan 5 steps to working safely during the COVID-19 pandemic. So first of all, carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment, and that needs to be specific to your industry. You also need to develop cleaning, hand washing and hygiene procedures. Helping people to work from home. Maintaining 2 metre social distancing where possible. And where people cannot be 2 metres apart, it's important to manage the transition risk. But these steps must be used in conjunction with your relevant industry guidance, which has yet to be introduced for tourism. So be prepared to watch this space. But preparing the building. Now, business owners and tenants must work in partnership. So are you liaising with your landlord as to what needs to happen? Who has responsibility for which? That may come down to your lease as well, because it's all to do with focusing on worker safety. But also, importantly, what about your building systems, your heating, your ventilation, your air conditioning, your fire systems, for example? They need to be very key in this. But updating the cleaning procedures, changes to cleaning scope or any additional services. Now, for the travel and tourism, we have the distancing. There's thermal imaging that some industries are going to start using. What about when people arrive? How do they book with you? We know the zoos have opened and they're only taking bookings online. So they're actually put in at a certain time to arrive to actually take that visit. If you are an industry where you are in the beauty, then obviously with the size of your business, is it 1 in, 1 out? What about, you know, technicians and clients having to wear face masks? Does that apply to your business? Agree policies with your landlord and in writing where appropriate. Engaging with your suppliers is also key. But complete inspections, remediations, repairs prior to opening is also very important. But preparing the workforce, so deciding who returns to the workplace and who continues to work from home. Now, you may have an issue where people are chomping at the bit to come back into the office. Again, as I said earlier, people may be very resistant to come back, or because of childcare issues, they're unable to. So having to make those decisions. What if somebody's refusing to come back in? What are your options there? So it could be, is it going to be unpaid leave where they have to take holiday? Is it because they're so concerned, or they have somebody shielding in their home that they're very concerned about? So developing employee communications in all of this area is key, but also to communicate what they should expect on their return. So it's not a case of, right, we're back in tomorrow, come on, we'll have everything in place. Because mitigating the anxiety of returning to the workplace through change management is key to your planning and your communications. And we've been insisting a large amount with employers in this arena. But also it's important to start providing information on new policies and procedures. Again, I will talk about other policies and procedures that should be reflective now of your industry and what's going on moving forward, because you also need to place your expectation on your employees of what you expect from them whilst they're in the workplace. So developing a really robust return to work plan is really effective, but it also needs to be fluid so it can be movable. So controlling access, controlling entry points. I've already mentioned with the beauty industry, is it going to be 1 person in, 1 person out? With, you know, when people are coming in, clients are coming in to have treatments. But what about entry points, people on the mobile phones? Are they going to have signs that people can't because they can transmit infection? So what about your reception areas as well? What about people arriving in, for example, the hotel industry, restaurants? So how are you going to control those entry points? What about your shipping areas, dispatching areas, the goods received areas? How's that going to take place? And what turnaround time are you going to have? What about reconfiguring lobby areas for social distancing? Installing plexiglass shields where appropriate. We've seen this an awful lot when this pandemic first started with the supermarkets, because that's part of PPE, protecting your staff and obviously your visitors. But what about your visitors' policies? Because these need to be implemented, what you expect from your visitors. So it also needs to be visual. Will you be providing them with face masks? Will you be providing them with gloves? What about checking in and checking out? Things like that. And determining lift protocols. So what's that going to be? Is it one person per lift? What about mechanical aids that are used? And also, these also are very key with disinfection, infection control. So there's an awful lot to consider. For social distancing plans, whilst I appreciate there's been a lot of communication about how it should be. Is it 2 meters? Is it 1 meter? We have to deal with the here and now of it's 2 meters, so we need to deal with that. So it's all about decreasing density. So designating foot traffic plan, a one-way system is key, but also it's important it's visual. And I've already mentioned about installing shields at counters and reception desks where appropriate, but also managing schedules. You know, people start times and finish times. So if you're in a situation where people start at the same time, everybody, that's not going to be decreasing density. So you may have to vary that. But also people have to travel at peak time on trains, on buses and things. This has been very key, hasn't it? Where the government are talking about. You also need maybe to vary that as well to accommodate your staff's concerned. Prohibiting shared use of small spaces. But also using technology, video conferencing. I think we've all got used to that now. I have to say it was quite daunting for me when it first started. But this still needs to be used a lot more when you're having meetings if people are working from home rather than bring them in and where appropriate, because minimising face-to-face meetings is still key. But your social distancing plan, as I say, 2 meters for now. But what about specifying seating arrangements for employees? You might need to redesign spaces. So you may have to alternate desk chair use. So, you know, you may need to cross off where they can't sit. We've seen this an awful lot, haven't we, in public transport and buses and things like that. Adding panels between desks if appropriate. But also enforcing stringent cleaning protocols for shared spaces. Whose responsibility is it? That also needs to be clearly defined. Again, because if it's employees' responsibility, you need to set the appropriate actions through your processes so your staff clearly understand what you require from them as well as what they require from you. So if that's not happening, there are steps you can take through your policies and procedures. But reducing capacity for spaces, so removing some chairs from large conference rooms to ensure the social distancing. And as I mentioned quite a lot, personal protective equipment. What do you need to provide? And it's got to be relevant to your industry as well. Your social distancing plan. If you have small rooms, convert them to single occupancy use, but it needs to be visual. So it's really important you designate and signpost the directions of foot traffic in main circulation paths. Now, health and safety have said they're going to be doing spot checks on all businesses. They charge £154 an hour and they're not shy of using that. So do you have the relevant COVID-19 health and safety posters displayed? So it's visual for people coming in, it's visual for people working in there, it's clearly defined and people can visually see what they need to be doing. We've seen this an awful lot in supermarkets, into the shops now, and to paving outside shops and the like. So is that working effectively for you? Have you taken this into account? So reducing your touch points, because this is key. That can be switching a light on and off. That can be using a handrail. So important to consider and making sure you enhance cleaning and disinfecting practices. Utilising touchless options for access and egress. Enforcing cleaning protocols. What about sanitising hands? So you're going to have sanitising points dotted frequently around. What about disinfecting door handles and the like? I know you're going to have it clearly signed off when they are as well. Also, another key thing is clean desk policy. So maybe that's something important to introduce. And introduce self-cleaning practices. So Will each desk have disinfectant wipes? Again, then you're placing the expectation on your staff to also engage with this as well. But removing high touch tools and equipment, marker pens, remote controls. What about in hotels, that TV remotes? So are they going to be sterilised and then disinfectantly packed for each time? Establishing a food kitchen rota, so if you have coffee tea areas, you have a kitchen area, you have a canteen, establishing rotas to, again, to decrease identity and the disinfecting procedures. And are you able to have an enclosed room designated to isolate anybody who may suddenly display symptoms? Because that's also key. Do you have a coronavirus policy? And people still look at me and think, really? It's really important, because what's your policy to recognising and what next steps are in regard of somebody suddenly displaying symptoms and the like? But communicating for confidence. So as an employer, communicating for confidence is key to your staff. But what about your leaders, your managers, your supervisors, your team leaders? Are they fully aligned on your return to work plans? Do they understand what needs to be communicated down? Because communicating now needs to go down as well as up. So establishing two-way communication couldn't be more important at this time, because creating a trusting and transparent culture is key. Because it's really important you can communicate positive news and negative news now. Now, we know that we've got some fabulous employees and workers in the business. Some can be rather challenging, but if it's very clear what your expectations are, your employees are concerned, making them feel secure, it will be much easier through your updated policies and procedures to manage maybe the difficult people. So what are your new protocols, for example, on working from home? Because they're the ambassadors for your business. So how do you want them to represent your business while working from home? You don't really want them with their feet up on the kitchen table with a cigarette in one hand and a glass of wine in the other while they're doing a Zoom call to a client. As much as I'm sure we've all felt like doing that at times. But what about your visitor policies? Because your visitors need to see what you expect from them as well. And your travel policies. So I've mentioned travelling to and from work, staggering the times. And if your staff are travelling for meetings, what have you, what are the policies on that so they feel safe? Because recognising fear and anxiety in people returning is really key. And I also haven't, discounted the fear and anxiety of employers trying to cope with all of this, which is why we're running this webinar today, and we can give you the one-to-one help on this as well, applicable to your business. So, as I mentioned earlier, getting it right. But considering an employee assistance program, I think now is a very key time. But with all of this, we need to continue to test and measure to see the validity of it working, but also to adapt as time progresses, as the restrictions are being lifted. So it needs to be very fluid. So with the return phrase, there's really three elements to this. So the short term is preparing for day one. And day one, what that looked like can be very indicative where your business is concerned. So this will be the new normal. But then we move to the midterm. So testing and validating the plans, because the progress is very unlikely to be linear, because with contamination, second wave of infection, it can slow things down. We may get new medication or a vaccine, or herd immunity can accelerate plans. But longer term, what the new business as usual looks like. Again, it still needs to be fluid to be effective. So the things to consider. Changes to the current lockdown restrictions are now changing more swiftly. So needing to be able to react to them effectively as your business is key. So being prepared. Now, as a business, Croner, we're up to date knowing the types of controls that every employer needs to consider. So we can give you the one-to-one information you need on your industry to help you prepare and plan your steps. So, and how you communicate that with your staff. As I mentioned before, that's whether it's good or bad news. So a degree of security is very important in very uncertain times. So letting staff know they are valued and supported is also key, because this is going to take a lot of change from a lot of people. And it can be with some, as I mentioned, with some staff, it's changing their hearts and minds as well, and how that's embedded in the business for you. So to summarise, being up to date and ready to open. demonstrating and providing adequate physical distancing, home working to still be maintained where possible. So ensuring people remain engaged and feel supported. Now with part-time furlough, that can be a bit of a headache. So how that actually works and how that can be effective for your business. So considering flexible working arrangements to reduce peak commuting times, again, is also key. So to summarise, staggered use of shared facilities such as tea, coffee, kitchen areas, canteens, restaurants, maintaining good hand hygiene and clean working areas, redesigning space for the longer term solution, but also looking out for people becoming overloaded. Now that may not be because they're problems getting used to the new ways of working in business. It can be something happening at home, it can be a partner's lost their job, or the children aren't back at school, they've got in trouble, what have you. So again, employee assistance program, the well-being. Communicating changes before return to reduce the anxiety as well. Because establishing protocols before returning to ensure safe practices are key. If you are back, re-establishing the protocols to fit is also key. Because getting ready for business is something that every business is doing. But also, I just need to reflect on keeping up to date with a couple of pieces of legislation that came in while we were in lockdown. First of all, the national living wage and the national minimum wage came into play and went up on the 1st of April. So the new rates are there. So you may inadvertently in lockdown and with lots of other things going on, just miss that the rate's going up. If you pay the minimum wages, please make sure they are being paid. As HMRC made more than 25 million in enforcement for businesses failing to pay the minimum wage or the national living wage in 2019. But also employment contracts, there's been a big change here. Now, Nick and I see lots of employment contracts. I see some that are just pages and pages long. That's not a good place to be because every word on all those pages is contractual. So an employment contract should contain the statutory elements of the contractual obligations and the explicit parts. How you want people to behave should sit elsewhere. So contracts under the Good Work Plan should now come to about 3 pages, 3.5 at the most. So with the Good Work Plan that came in on the 6th of April, there is a day one right for all workers to receive a written contract. So there was no right for a worker to receive a contract prior to this. So if you take on any new staff, which I very much hope you'll be in a position to do, as well as having the downside of looking who you may need to part company with, there's a day one right to a written contract. Now, where employees and workers are concerned, they will now have similar contracts, but it will be clearly defined what the relationship is. But also there's certain prescribed elements that must be in the written contract. So details on probation, all paid leave, that includes all statutory leave. So another update that came in on the 6th of April was Jack's Law on bereavement leave. So you'll need to look at your policies and procedures on bereavement leave as well to make sure it's reflective. Or remuneration and benefits, and that can be help with travel. It can be luncheon vouchers. What about training entitlement, what the right to training is? That's not just mandatory, but other training. And more specifically, information on working hours and days they will be working. So the contract is very clear what the two-way obligations are. You may be in a position where your contracts are very much out of date, or you may be in a position where you haven't actually got contracts. May I respectfully suggest you contact Nick after the event today to have a chat about that, because I take the view it's never too late to put it right and we can do it quietly and compliantly for you. If you have self-employed people working for you, do you have a contract for services with them? Because it's very important, it's clearly defined again what the relationship is. Now also under the Good Work Plan, there's a right to switch to a fixed working pattern. So a right to switch to a more stable contract. This is predominantly for those with unstable, unpredictable hours. A clear example of that is the 0 hours workers. So if they've been with your business for 26 weeks, they will have the right to request to switch to a fixed working pattern for a more stable contract, to give them greater certainty around the number of hours they will work or the minimum number of hours they can expect. So if you've had somebody working on a 0 hour contract prior to the pandemic, doing the same days and the same hours for a long time, you could really struggle to veto this on a reason prescribed by law. But if this is something that you think could be an issue with you, we're not saying don't use 0-hour workers. What we're saying is the new legislation came in, so do take some advice from us on that if you do get a request. For setting out your standards and expectations of how you want your employees, your workers to behave in your business is now more than ever extremely important. So do you have an employee handbook or a staff handbook? Because it should not be in your contract terms, because legislation changes at least twice a year, and never have I known a legislation change where it doesn't impact on a staff handbook at some point. So do you have a staff handbook? Where do you keep it? How do you share it with your staff? But importantly now, when was the last time you updated it? Because does it cover what you need from your staff within your business? And does it also take into account any other legislation that sits alongside your business? So these are some of the policies that need to be reviewed, because with the recent legislation, you may have to look at now an attendance policy. Holidays, paid time off. The government gave us a view some time ago that staff were able to carry over their holiday unused for 2 years where appropriate. What does that mean for you? Because maybe that doesn't work for your business. So what do your policies and procedures say on that? What are your rules on remote working? What about working hours, including stop times, especially with decreasing the density, your breaks, your lunch times, flexible hours, staggered working hours? All these things need to be reviewed. But also timekeeping. What about clocking in and clocking out procedures? How's that going to impact you with sanitisation if they actually have to do it? We have an online system that also has a blip on the personal phones that they can clock in and out on that. So again, that can decrease the touching in, touching out that you have in your business. But what about your policies including sick leave? Now, if somebody has to isolate because they have the coronavirus symptoms, then obviously they need a certificate from 111. But also, if you have a business with less than 250 staff, you can reclaim back from the government SSP for 14 days. As I say, the restrictions are your business must have less than 250 staff. But also, what do your policies say on sickness absence? Because if your policies are more generous, then because the government have brought this in, you would still have to pay them full pay. What about your travel policies, including business and personal travel for their own health, safety and hygiene? But also information technology and usage. This came very much into key when people are working from home. So they've got access to a lot of information. You need to stay GDPR compliant. But also with that information they hold on work laptops now at home, what about other people having access to it? So do they have passwords? Are the obligations on your employees to keep the information locked and secure if they walk away from the laptop? Again, it's passing the responsibility for how employees behave onto the employee as well, should there be any issues, that you can see a direct correlation. As a business, you're doing as much as you can for clear understanding and guidance. So in summary, there are a lot of factors to consider when reopening, and it needs to be very reflective of your industry. So staff hours may need to be modified, and special considerations will need to be made in managing staff on their return to work. But it's very much key on protecting clients and staff and customers. And these new measures will likely to be in place for some time. So now is the time for your policies and procedures to reflect current working practices. We have an online system called Bright HR. It's an online HR system. It's also got a really effective furlough navigator. It also sits along Bright Safe, which I'll speak about in a moment. But I just want to run a quick video on Bright HR to show you how effective it can be within your business, with your staff, whether you're a small business or a larger business, to help you get things right first time where your staff are concerned.
Introducing Bright HR's Back to Work Navigator. The Back to Work Navigator is easily accessible from your Bright HR dashboard and will guide you through all of your return to work processing. You will see the number of currently furloughed employees within the business and a quick link to create back to work rotas, ensuring that the safety and well-being of your staff is accounted for as members of the team return. Rotas will also alert you to current employee absence as you add shifts, ensuring that the correct individuals are assigned to the correct working times. Once the rota is published, everyone included in that rota will receive a notification informing them that a new rota has been added and that they're included. This will be sent directly to their Bright HR account via email, and if they have the Bright HR app downloaded on their mobile, to their mobile phone too. In order to track and monitor these staggered shifts, you also have access to our free clocking in and clocking out app, Blip. Blip will allow you to oversee the working times for your employees and add any instances of lateness to their profile should start times not be adhered to. You will also be able to view all current and past furlough absences in the calendar, giving you at a glance information pertaining to the start and end times or ongoing furlough absences within the business. The Back to Work Navigator will also allow you to create company-wide notifications, which will be sent to every member of staff on the system, providing you the quick and simple means to convey important messages and information to your employees. As part of Bright HR's Back to Work tools, we have also created a Back to Work e-learning course with information and guidance on various aspects of return, such as social distancing and hygiene measures within the business, providing a certificate upon completion of the final assessment. Our new employee status feature will allow you to view and edit the location of an employee if they are away from the company site, assisting with the preparation of social distancing measures within the workplace. The annual leave summary report will further support this, allowing you to track annual leave taken and the remaining balance for individual employees within this annual leave year. You also have access to our 24-hour advice line, connecting you to a member of the team who can provide expert advice on all things required in the return to work process. Finally, as part of our Back to Work Navigator, you will also find all of the support, guidance, and advice required to ensure that you are both compliant and safe when staff members return. Resources here include downloadable templates which can be utilised and adapted to suit all of your business needs. Log in to Bright HR today to guarantee that you are back to work ready and fully compliant with return to work procedures. Stay safe and take care.
So as you can see, it's a very effective system. So as an employer, gives you the assistance to make sure you get the right information, clear understanding, and getting it right first time. There's also the opportunity to have a safe check, return to work safe check, that somebody will come into your business, our health and safety expert will come in, spend time to make sure and give you advice on what you need to do. And look at, you'll have posters that you'll be able to put up, or for example, mask fitting poster, contractor and visitor guidance, returning to work, checklist, hand hygiene, social distancing, hygiene at work. And as a BBF member, this is available to you for £195 plus VAT, which is a £100 saving. If you feel this is something that you would like, so you can get the help and guidance moving forward, please do give Nick a ring on 07896 036 993. Once I finish the webinar today, you will be able to have a chat with Nick online as well if you feel that would help you. But alongside the return to work safe check, that we also have Bright Safe, and this is very much all the health and safety for your business as well, that gives you back to work sector guidance. And as you can see, there's hygiene guidance, reopening, checklists, the secure display notices, all your health and safety policies, procedures and management systems, your risk assessments, including your work from home guides and checklists, and e-learning to help managers and employees understand what's required moving forward as well. If you feel that's something that could assist you, especially in the travel and tourism industry, do have a word with Nick and he can chat you through that as well. But there's a lot of legislation out there to start with, and there's even more legislation now because of the pandemic. And there's a lot of legislation that sits with the employee, but we're saying that's fine. As an employer, let us work with you to make legislation works for you. So that, as I mentioned very early on, the discussions you have, the decisions you make, the processes you use, you're getting it right first time. So then if you are challenged, you can demonstrate it's working effectively. So if you feel that's something you'd like assistance on or help with, please don't hesitate to contact Nick. You can email him at nick.babington@croner.co.uk. And he'd be delighted to answer any questions, or you must just have some concerns you want to chat through. Please take the time to have a chat with us. We're very happy to give you the information for you to go away and feel more secure and you're thinking of what you want to do. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to the webinar. I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and come back into the room. So if you'd like to unmute your mics and have a Q&A, then please do feel free. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jill. That was great. Please feel free, everyone, to unmute and ask questions. Nick's also available to direct questions to as well.
I think I'll just say that I'm the person that Jill keeps talking about. So I thought I'd say hello. It was an excellent session. Jill, again, bang up to date. We know that there's some more changes due out on Monday. So that'll be good fun too for you to research and keep people up to date. So I hope that if there's no questions, of course, you've got my email address, and we'd be very happy to talk to any of you on a personal level. Complimentary support and advice, absolutely fine. But nice to, I can't really see any of you actually. You're all hiding away, but I'm sure you're there. As I said, we're always here to help you if indeed there's anything you need. Thank you, Maxine.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, really great session, Jill. There's quite a lot actually that's made me think about my own workplace as well. So, you know, returning back to work, it's quite a lot to take on for everybody, and I'm sure there's lots of questions out there, but no one wants to come forward. We will be sharing the slides. I do have, let's have a look. I've got a question, or I've got a chat come through. We are a community centre that clearly has a different issue to many other places, as we only have 10 staff, but our main footfall is the public hirers. My concern is about toilets. Do we need to block some out, i.e. do we need to close some off?
I can answer that, and then maybe if Jill's got anything to add on from a legal perspective, she can. I've got a number of community centre clients, as it happens, and little small social clubs, and I'm actually the chairman of Cheersley Cricket Club here in Buckinghamshire, and we work as a community centre, and we provide our space when we're not playing cricket. So similar business, I'd say. There is an obligation under obviously employment law, because you've got 10 staff. To give you an idea, Croner's average client has 7. So having 10, you're slightly above that. The majority, I'm guessing, are part-time. You as a community centre have a responsibility to ensure that your users are fully aware of their health and safety responsibilities regarding especially the COVID. So you'd be expecting them to provide you with the certificate that needs to be rewarded for making sure that the COVID risk assessments and method statements have been done. You do become the responsible. It's a bit like being the competent person on a building site. So if you have a building site as the main competent person and you're inviting other trades in, you still overhold that main responsibility. So it is actually it is still quite tricky to manage. To answer your questions, I don't know what your toilet facilities look like, but you know, if you go into a typical male toilet where there might be, you know, urinals there, you would need to block off at least 50%. I know that answer because that came up in a health and safety seminar we recently did. So you would look at blocking off either other. If you have cubicles, then you wouldn't need to necessarily block something off. But again, the wash facilities, you'd need to make sure that there's just the one person using the sink If there's two sinks next to each other, then you block one off. So you're looking at taking out the middle one. That's what you would do. And a sign, my suggestion is to put on the doors to really try and encourage a one in, one out if you can. Now, people may ignore that, but at least you're showing the fact that you've tried to put a process in place which is reasonable. So again, you know, you need to ensure that that's all written down and put in a document, and a risk assessment needs to follow along that too, to show that you're trying as a business to be as competent as you can and put the onus back on the people using your centre and the staff. I'm not quite sure which person here you are.
I don't have a name either, Nick, unfortunately. It's just
okay.
office. So I'm not.
Okay, all right, no problems at all. Well, again, you know, I'm hoping that's useful.
Also, if you have hand towels, you can't have hand towels out that more than one person can use. So if you have paper towels, how are they going to be disposed of? They have to be disposed of so other people can't come into contact with them. So there's quite a few issues, and where that, again, with the hirers, placing the responsibility on them, what they need to do with their people coming in, and that all needs to be through your policies and procedures and the contracts they sign with you, because it all comes down to liability. And as a community centre, then you don't particularly have owners, but you have trustees, and unless you assign the liability to the people hiring, the liability will always sit with the trustees.
Okay.
They have vicarious liability.
Great, thanks, Jill. That was actually Jules. She's just messaged at Hazelmere. So thanks, Jules, for the question. I hope Nick and Jill have helped you answer your query, and you're now able to go forward and know what to do.